Welcome to the Revenue Above Replacement podcast. I'm your host, Adam Grossman. With us today is Jon Fascitelli. Jon, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Yeah, great to see you. Great to talk to you. And I'm glad to have you on. And first question we will have, which is the same first question we have for all of our guests, is can you walk us through your career to date and tell us how you got to the position you're in today?
Sure. Well, today I'm currently the founder, CEO of Seregh, which is a real estate development company focused on sports and entertainment. And how I got here, well, it's been a fun and interesting journey. I grew up in New Jersey, went to high school in Manhattan, went to college in Rhode Island, and after which was in investment banking, then went on to business school, following which it was at Colony Capital. At Colony was a $45 billion alternative asset manager focused on real estate, private equity. And one of the first deals that was done at the organization was while I was there, was the acquisition of PSG. And that was kind of the aha moment from which we got involved with a project around Giant Stadium at the time called Xanadu, now the American Dream, which while the project itself went through multiple refinancings and challenges, also kind of looked at the opportunity around stadium and development around it. And from there, that led me to a host of things with David Blitzer, one of the members at Blackstone, and then to Josh Harris, which led to about a decade as the CEO and founder of the development company within Harris Blitzer. Where we were focused on doing real estate projects for the 76ers, ultimately the Commanders, Guardians, Devils, and everything else in the portfolio, where we were looking at stadium renovations, new stadium designs, and then mixed use around it. And that was kind of ultimately the genesis of Seregh, which was a spin out of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment.
Yeah, I think if for a lot of our members of our audience, they've potentially heard me talk about sports anchored mixed use development or sports and real estate anchored mixed use development. You are if not the foremost expert, one of the foremost experts on the topic in the world. Can you just talk about what that means? Like, what are all those different terms mean, and how did you get, kind of interested and excited in pursuing these opportunities?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great space. I think as we've seen the evolution of media content and consumption, what that really is translated to is more shows, events, and people going to them. And so these arenas and stadiums, which once upon a time when the sports teams weren't playing, were more dormant, are now activated on a daily and regular basis. And so you could see arenas with upwards of 200 to 250 events a year. That translates into 5 to 7 million people of foot traffic. And once you get that many people going to a location, you can build out the retail. So, I mean, if you think about it today, when you go to a game, it's nice to go early and catch a dinner. It's great to stay late and catch a drink or an ice cream. And it's that foot traffic and activity that can drive retail development. Once the retail is in place, people want to live around it. So you get the residential, and then people want to work there. You get the office, and all of a sudden you have live, work, play, which is kind of common vernacular now. But what that really translates into is the ability to create vibrant community around sports and entertainment. And what that then translates into is interesting opportunities for investment, interesting opportunities to enhance fan experience, interesting opportunities for community, and then interesting opportunities for cities, states, and sovereigns to benefit from the enhanced economic activity and increase in tax revenue. So what we're talking about today when we say mixed use anchored entertainment and sport districts is what we're talking about is these vibrant ecosystems that are ripe for investment and that benefit multiple stakeholders. And today translates into an opportunity for institutional capital and institutional development capability. And that's kind of what Seregh provides.
Yeah, I want to talk about all of those in more detail, particularly all the opportunities you mentioned across all those different categories. But I think it's good to, which I often say a lot, is always good to start at the beginning. You've been at the forefront of this while this is, mixed use developments have gotten more attention, particularly more recently. This you were talking about, obviously, with MetLife Stadium. Can you talk about what things were like in the past and kind of some of the evolutions you've seen in this space over time before you started Surge.
Yeah, look, I think in the early 90s, you would put a venue as into the hinterlands because we were doing 40 to 60 activations, and the rest of the time it was dark. And so put these big parking lots around it, and people would go sparingly, and the venues frankly weren't profitable. I think today with this heightened activity, they could be put in the center of kind of downtown cores. And what we're seeing is that they can revitalize communities or generate new communities, and that they're really good economic tools that can be used for sound economic policy. And so with that increased activity, and I mean, I was saying, but as like an economic cheeseburger to a starving city, right? Like there's a real opportunity to use these venues as a tool to drive growth. And so, I mean, I think the evolution is, I think there's been a lack of capital and a lack of expertise on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have team owners that when they step into ownership have incredible civic responsibility to create a great arena that's great for the fans, and that focus on the front office and winning championships. They're not necessarily, in most cases, real estate developers, and they're already financially on the hook for quite a bit. I mean, they have a lot of wealth concentrated in team. They've got a lot of wealth concentrated in venue, and so even though these facilities can generate billions of dollars of opportunity for development, they don't necessarily want to be on the hook for the cost. And so you have this combination of now a willingness to write the check on the one hand, and a lack of the development capability on the other hand. I mean, they're team owners, real estate developers, and so it's just, so the opportunity is there, but the capability isn't, and that's kind of where we come in with both the investment capital as well as the development expertise to build. And where we see this go, I mean, and so we've seen this first. It sort of happened more accidentally. Think about the Padres, or think about Wembley, kind of where cities have spawned around it, and there's been no beneficiary as it relates to the venue, to kind of evolutionary steps of success on smaller scales. And I think today what we really see is that there's really an opportunity to supersize it, and so to just go bigger, like to acquire multiple to tens of city blocks, to be much more dramatic and impactful and what the opportunity is. And there's, frankly, there still remains hesitancy on the team side and on the consultant side, because they don't necessarily have the capabilities or wherewithal to do it. And so, again, that's where we come in, filling that void, supersizing it. And so, I mean, that's really the crux of where we see this going.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a good pathway to talk about Surge explicitly, talk about what you guys do. In particular, when you mentioned that team ownership groups or consultants don't have the capabilities, on the development side, and well, particularly on the development side. Can you talk about in more detail, A, what Surge does, and B, how you provide those capabilities, particularly on the real estate development side?
Yeah, sir. So we're a combination of sports expertise and real estate expertise. We were a spin out of HRS Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. They were an anchor investor along with CAA, Delaware North, and a host of others. Then we put together a board as well that was kind of a blended expertise that has the lead director from MSG. It has the president of Cronky Sports and Entertainment. It has some of our investors, but then on the real estate side, it also has the former CEO and chairman of Brookfield and former head of Tornado DC. The former CEO and chairman of Brookfield is also the head of our investment committee. And from there, we've built out an organization where today we have directly and indirectly about 140 people working globally, and it represents the best in real estate in the sport. And so we're bringing this hardcore institutional capability of both managing capital, where we can be the fiduciary of billions of dollars on the one hand, and on the other hand, we're bringing kind of the best and the brightest from the development universe, so that we could sit down with teams, we can sit down with cities, states, and sovereigns, and we can say, hey, this is your sports asset, this is the surrounding, and we can put together a plan that envisions a future of mixed use development. Then we can finance it with our private equity, and then we can build and operate it with our capabilities so that we can deliver anywhere from 3 to 5, and now in some cases $10 to $20 billion projects. And we can do it both domestically in the US as well as in Europe, the GCC, and Asia. And so we're creating the first of its kind global platform that's exclusively focused on sports and entertainment real estate.
And then one of the other questions that came up from what you just said is, there's a global platform, but there's clearly differences between global development and, even global developments in different parts of the world versus domestic development. Can you talk about any differences that you've seen so far, or maybe there aren't? Maybe are there substantial differences between the global platform and the domestic platform?
Look, there's similarities and there are differences. So on the similarity side, the demand and the need are the same. With TikTok and Instagram, media consumption has become pretty homogenous across the world, and so the appetite for the consumer experience around media and entertainment is just there. What differs is how much infrastructure is already in place, both physical infrastructure as well as content distribution to provide the content globally. So that's one area. So second, supply chains, like processes, things of that sort are increasingly more homogenized. I think we definitely have different varying local regulations that need to be thought about from a development perspective, but the underlying core thesis of developing community and physical infrastructure that benefits the community around sports and entertainment is consistent across the board. And so we think that globally the total addressable market's about $1 trillion.
Yeah, you and I joked about this in our paper. We said $100 billion plus, and you've always said it's $1 trillion. And I think it's more likely that your estimate is right than our original estimate. But
more near-term domestic, we're long-term global. But I'm glad you're coming around.
Yeah, it seems like it's only, maybe $1 trillion might be a lowball estimate at this point. But speaking of financing, that's one of the other areas we want to talk about. You mentioned this before. You are successfully attracted leading entities in the sports space, real estate space to provide capital for what you're doing. And you talked about providing capital to these projects. I mean, what you're talking about is billions of dollars in capital. So from your perspective, one, obviously you mentioned Harris Blitzer being an anchor. How did you, secure that relationship? But how do you, this is something that some of our audience is not to the scale you're talking about, but talking to investors, raising money for businesses. What are some of the things that you think have been successful or have led to your success in raising the amount of money that you've been able to raise?
Yeah, look, at first, I think you need a sound and differentiated business plan. In the private equity arena, there's definitely more the haves and the have-nots at this point. Institutional investors are looking for kind of the tried and true names, and then the tried and true names become kind of allocators to the space. That's on kind of the on the mass strategies. Then there are the more niche strategies, an area where we're playing, where we have a certain specialization that doesn't necessarily exist broadly, and so that gives us a slightly different proposition, so that we can lean more into the haves than into the nots category. But look, I mean, I think it stems from long-term relationships, extensive track record and expertise, building the right cohesive team, and then having access to the right opportunities and being able to demonstrate both trust, accountability, and then capability. And so we bring all of that, and then it's about getting the right partners early on that kind of believe that can kind of help facilitate. So it's an intricate process, but it's fun being able to interact with some of the smartest people globally, both thinking about how to implement in their regions and abroad, as well as discussing how to allocate capital globally around the strategy is exciting and rewarding. But at the end of the day, we're really driven by mission and just the power of sports and entertainment and the impact that it can have on community, and we're just trying to play our role in it.
Yeah, I want to get back to the impact on community, but first, you mentioned some of the luminaries and people who are involved, whether Josh Harris, David Blitzer, you know, interacting with people who are obviously at the top of their field, and obviously you are as well. What is it like to interact with those people? What are they looking for? How do you communicate? How do you think about those interactions when you're, obviously so much is at stake, and these developments are increasingly becoming such important assets, particularly for sports properties.
Yeah, look, I think it's twofold. At the end of the day, everyone's people. Like people are people, and you have to personally relate to people and garner trust on the one hand, and then separately, like you have to offer something that people need, and be able to demonstrate ability to deliver. And so I think it's a combination of both. And so we've been fortunate. You mentioned Josh and David, like that's over 15 plus years of developing relationships, working together, demonstrating capability, etc. And I will say those are some of the most special individuals in the world. I mean, their 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 intellectual capacity, as well as their on the one side, and their commitment to their families and their friends on the other. They're just two very special humans that have really demonstrated their abilities to have an impact on the world, both financially as well as from a humanitarian perspective as well. And then I think it's further demonstrated by their stewardship in their leagues, and really how they're role models across all the leagues that they participate in, which is all five now, plus the European leagues as well.
And impact is the next point I wanted to get into, which is, you've talked about impacts on communities, and clearly the work at Harris Blitzer and now at Seregh has a substantial impact on communities. Can you talk about, one thing you mentioned is talking to governments and sovereigns. Can you talk about what are those conversations like? How much do they, would you say get it? And how much is convincing, like, here's what we can do, how we can do it, and making things happen within, either communities or, governments or regional opportunities or national opportunities?
Sure. Yeah. When I think about community builders, I immediately think of church or mosque or religion on the one hand, and then I think sport. Both are powerful drivers of community. We're sitting in a moment in time in which there's a lot of uncertainty about how technology will have an impact on lives and jobs and whatnot. But I think if you assembled a panel of AI specialists and have a conversation about live entertainment, they'd all unanimously say that live entertainment is here to stay, independent of what robots are controlling or not controlling in the future, right? And so that's very powerful. Once upon a time, we went to a mall, and like you would go to the movie theater, and then afterwards you go to all the infill restaurants or whatever. Like there aren't those kind of drivers anymore. Whereas live entertainment remains. I might be able to put on a headset and like zoom into an experience. I might be able to see you in that experience, and we might be able to interact and see an event, but it still won't beat like sitting and having popcorn and pop and like watching a game together, like sitting next to each other in an arena or a stadium, right? And so it's that fundamental underpinning of shared experience which can be garnered through music and entertainment, live music and live sport. There really is kind of the underpinning, and so that shared experience is good for the community. It's good for camaraderie. It's good for social. It's good. It's good on so many scales. And then just leaving your home and going somewhere where you're going to spend money on the retail, and spend money at the hotel, and spend money on your rent, and spend money on is creating economic flow into the economy. That economic activity allows for more jobs and for more tax revenue, and for things that important to the economy, and thus important to the citizens within. And so And so conversations with city, state, and sovereign is very much about providing services that makes the citizens and fans happy, and then adding to or driving things that create economic activity and economic output that are also good for people and the community. And so they're kind of really powerful tools. And so early on I said supersize. Well, yeah, the bigger the project, the better, the more impactful, the more economic activity. And so we're sitting there having conversations with city, states, and sovereigns about how to do anywhere from 5, 10, $20 billion type projects that will drive like huge transformative change in a positive way. And so the conversations have been pretty well received as a result.
And, I do want to you've talked about this global and big and better, but a lot of what, you have to consider and you're talking about is local communities, right? And community leaders, even outside the government structure. How do you guys think about, interacting and engaging with community leaders, particularly those in the areas where this impact is going to happen?
Yeah, one of our first hires was someone that focused on public policy, community development, et cetera. Like you cannot lose sight of your neighbors and how they feel and how they'll be integrated into the project. And so that requires boots on the ground, lots of meetings, really understanding and aligning with the community for these type of projects to be successful and to benefit all the stakeholders. But community first is a critical pillar to approaching these projects.
And I think that's exactly right. Right. It's, you have to be able to engage with the community. They have to understand what's going on and why this is beneficial. And one of the communities that you're looking to expand into recently is colleges and university development. One, can you talk about with engaging in those communities and if that's different from professional sports communities? And two, like what's the opportunity that you guys see in colleges and universities?
Look, I'm glad you asked the question. I think colleges and universities can serve as key roles and pillars of the communities with which they are in, and the camaraderie around the sport, not only the students at the university, but everyone in the surrounding area is incredible. So the premises that we've talked about are very, very similar on the university front. And when you look at the university landscape, the infrastructure is pretty aged, and so it's really a moment in time where there's a catalytic opportunity to upgrade that sports infrastructure and then to think about the development around it. I fundamentally come back to supersize. So, I guess I should be paying McDonald's a royalty, but bigger is better. And there is really an opportunity to be thinking bigger master plans, thinking bigger development projects, et cetera. And there's been a historic hesitation or lack of know-how to do that. And I think that it's not saying, hey, we're a campus that has 1,000 acres, let's think about how to use 100 acres. It's really saying, hey, let's think about what all that 1,000 acres will be and how we're gonna implement that, and how we're gonna implement that with one of our core anchors being our sports and entertainment facilities. But then let's layer on the learning components, the student housing, and then integrate the mixed income projects and then other components that can benefit the community around the university as well. And so yeah, it's going to be an important area for us, and one we're excited on, and we've got a ton of conversations going on across the country in this space as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've talked about on the podcast is, the intersection of private equity at colleges and universities, because that's a very important topic. And mixed use development is probably one of the best use cases, potentially, of private equity and institutional capital in college, at least from my perspective. One, do you agree with that? And then two, When you talk about leveraging capital sources and going big, like what does that mean for a college or university? Like what is, if you can get the institutional capital or outside capital and development resources, how can you do these supersized projects on colleges and universities?
So, so I think that there's a real opportunity for private equity in the space. I think that again, it comes back to capability and expertise to implement, and usually those are separate and distinct. So, private equity is an adept at operating, but development can be different and is a little bit different, and that capability doesn't necessarily lie, at least within the big private equity houses, so much, but it does in certain areas, and so we see it as a ripe opportunity to partner to help deliver on the expertise side. The other thing is that the importance of evergreen capital, both collegiate and also professional, et cetera. We're talking about long part the sports and entertainment assets could be anywhere from 30 to 40 years in nature. And so when you're talking about these integrated developments, you want your partner who's operating them to have a similar duration horizon and timeline. Don't necessarily want to sit there with the developer, build something, and then immediately sells it. And so as a team or a university, you're sitting there going, who am I going to interface with now? And so that's something that we think also kind of differentiates us in our approach and strategy. But the universities at hand, like as they think bigger with partners like us, while we're providing the capital, we're also sharing in some of the profits as well, so that there's alignment and long-term benefit on multiple fronts.
And one of the differences between colleges and universities and many, but not all professional sports teams is where they're located, right? A lot of colleges and universities are not in urban areas where professional sports teams are in more urban areas. Can you talk about the differences just from a development perspective and what you think about if there are between like urban urban environments with pre-existing infrastructure versus more not urban environments, particularly where colleges and universities typically sit?
Look, I think that the opportunity set is the same. I think the scale might be different. So though we might be talking about around a professional sport or in like a major urban core, a multiple billion-dollar project size. In some of these other markets, where we're talking about some universities and kind of outlying areas, it might be more in the anywhere from 350 million to a billion. So the projects maybe a bit smaller, but the impact, the dramatic impact that they can have on the surroundings still remains the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, as we're kind of heading towards the end of the conversation, two other topics I wanted to talk about. Real estate's obviously has real name; it's considered real assets. But and you mentioned technology, but the technology's impact on these developments has changed, is rapidly growing, rapidly evolving. So, how do you see from your perspective, how do you integrate technology or technology, either thought leadership or obviously real technology integrations into these mixed use development? What are you guys looking at from a technology perspective?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's important to stay at the forefront of what of a cycle that we're experiencing right now. That's rapid change. I think technology has a dramatic impact in a host of areas of our business. It can have it on the design and construction side. It can have it on the financial performance side. It can have it and then it can have it on, at the end of the day, our consumer experience. So I would say think about it across those three pillars. So if I go back and the design and construction, I mean, someday you could be and you're starting to see this already, like you can leverage AI to create master plans, renderings, design docs, et cetera. I mean, obviously you still have to rely on partnerships with great architect firms and great engineering firms, et cetera. But some of the processes are being simplified now with AI. At some point on the manufacturing side, you could see kind of dark factory production of materials. You could potentially see humanoid type bots contributing to the construction and development process. I mean, I don't think these trends are happening overnight, but we're seeing meaningful steps in each of these areas. On the financial analysis side, on the data management side, we're implementing systems right now that's facilitating our underwriting processes globally. And then as it relates more to the consumer facing side, look, AI is a great way to scale one-to-one. AI enables one-to-one interaction effectively, which is the holy grail. I mean, if I could do every one of my meetings one-to-one, it would be great, but I'm always looking for one-to-many so I can get the story out. Now, if I had a AI, I could train it, and then I can replicate that experience for many people. And so that has an interesting paradigm for consumers, whether it relates to catering to their preferences, whether it relates to catering to their retail needs, whether it relates to promotions, whether just how they interact with the physical environment, and then understanding how they interact with the physical environment. Then we can modify, adjust, improve the physical environment accordingly as well. And so it's pervasive in every aspect of the business. And at the end of the day, it can drive a better consumer experience as well as financial efficiency, which can drive better returns, as well as returns both from a return on investment perspective as well as just a return to the community and to the associated experience.
Yeah, I mean, the personalization at scale, I assume at some point there'll be a Jon Fascitelli AI agent that can have more of these one-on-one conversations, but on your behalf. But one of the things you mentioned is how technology does potentially, or the artificial intelligence or this level of personalization does impact the building process, or potentially impact the building process. I don't know if there's specific examples where you saw either, historically or as you're thinking about new developments now, where you've seen, some of either leveraging AI or leveraging large data sets that's impacted the way you think about how these developments can come online from a live, work, play, shop perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just came back from Asia where I was on a panel with at Milken talking about the future of sports marketing, and on the panel was a woman from IBM, and we were talking about how we process large data sets to really understand customer preference and experience, and how we could think about it both spatially as well as from a transactional perspective. And so as we increasingly have more data to pull, and we can have a better understanding of the individuals coming through, we could think about how we're positioning our retail tenants and what we're offering in our hotels, how we're thinking about our outdoor advertising, et cetera. And so it creates really a 360 experience that's better for the consumer, but it's also more optimized for us as landlord as well as for our tenants.
And then you've mentioned this before, and I believe in this too, but that the actual rise of artificial intelligence is going to increase the appetite for in real life experiences. And those type of experiences can be shaped by data or technology. As we're kind of winding in, obviously that's a thesis that seems to be central to Surge, is like there's this cool intersection of technology, data, and real assets. But how do you think of that? How do you communicate that? And how do you kind of let that be, if it is a guiding force, on kind of what you're doing?
Well, I think putting aside policy disclosures and whatnot that you have to convey to consumers if you're collecting or using information, which obviously any of those are required, but fundamentally at the end of the day, the consumer that's having the experience wants the highest and greatest experience, and putting aside privacy policy,
Right.
the consumer is just looking for the best experience. They're not thinking about how am I being handed this experience. So So, and us as developer, landlord, operator, owner of these multi-billion-dollar cities is thinking about how do we make the people that live within in them the happiest and give them the greatest utility. And so it's less about the communication of how, and it's more about having the kind of the right underlying plumbing to deliver it efficiently. And I think where AI really comes in is rather than like an old school approach of surveying people and getting a sense of their wants, needs, and likes. Like now we're looking at we can analyze and predict their behaviors and patterns based upon huge amounts of data sets, and then give them more of a customized experience that's going to leave them feeling happier and more satisfied. Whether they need to know the ins and outs of how it's done, again, putting aside privacy policy because that's essential, but doesn't really matter. And so we just try and focus on making the experiences as seamless and integrated as possible. And we think about how do we extend their journey from the ballpark to their home, to their office, to their restaurants and dining and whatnot, just be as seamless and as desirable as possible. And then we try and reduce any of the friction costs in between so that it's much more efficient, so that it can be priced better for the consumer, and so that it can remain profitable for the investor.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about leveraging large data sets again in a privacy compliant way, is to make the experience better, right? I mean, that's data, technology, experience working together to create better experiences for everybody who's involved. And that can be all the people you mentioned so far. Could be the properties, the fans, the tourists, the rights, the partners, community, the government. This is what big data can really do. And it can really move beyond survey data to really behavioral based data, or what, in our parlance in the data side is behavioral graphs, where you can really understand what people are looking for. And one terrible way I describe this, instead of the field of dreams, build it and they will come, build what they want so they want to come, right? It's like build the things that are interesting and make people happy. And this is a unique opportunity that sports has because of the interest in mixed use developments to make all of these stakeholders happy. And obviously you're at the forefront of doing that. So after that soliloquy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or if there's anything you wanted to put, or if there's anything else you wanted to, from that perspective, because then one final question we have for you after that, but just wanted to see if you agreed or if there's anything from that perspective you wanted to add.
No, I agree. We've had these conversations before. We're pretty aligned. I think that you have to be at the forefront. You have to be at the forefront of technology and technology implementation to make sure that these projects that can take anywhere from 5 to 15 years to see through fruition are at the forefront as well. And we're talking about massive investment in infrastructure, and so that will last centuries. And so you damn well better be at the forefront of technology to make sure that your investment is for the long term and not just the near term.
Yeah, the complete alignment there. So last question, which we ask all of our guests, you mentioned that you have 140 folks working for you, either directly or indirectly. You're hiring people quickly. We have a lot of members of our audience who are either trying to get into sports, trying to get their first jobs in sports or finance. When you're looking to hire folks and as they're pursuing their career journey, what are you looking for from people? How do you determine if these people would be a good fit for Surge? How do how would they be potentially a good fit for them to progress in their career within your organization? What are the qualities and characteristics you look for in hiring folks, either at more junior positions or more senior positions?
Well, my first and biggest thing is reach out. Just reach out. Like do your research on the company.
Yeah.
Reach out to to a host of different people within the organization. Like you can get a first call. It's amazing how many people say, "Oh, I want to go do this," but don't necessarily reach out. And I for one personally try and have as many conversations as I can have with anyone, because my view is you learn something from everyone. And so one and two people, like you pay it forward. So people generally are inclined to want to help people, and so and then if you're interested in the sports space, like get in wherever you can. It's two approaches. Either get in wherever you can, which works well because teams, etc. Like they're incredible training grounds to learn. Or alternatively, if there's a specialized area you want to go into, figure out where to get the training first, and then make the phone calls and reach out and get in. So I mean, there's really two approaches, but fundamentally, at the end of the day, sports industry more than any industry is focused on teamwork, leadership skills, like everything that you see on the field or on the court, right? And so if you reach out if you reach out, if you present yourself well, if you show a sound understanding of what you're looking for, et cetera, you're going to find a whole host of people that want to help you, because at the end of the day, fundamental is teamwork and growing that teamwork. So that's one. And then the other is energy, like just high energy, like sports are high energy and the people in it are generally high energy too. And so like demonstrate that energy. But if you're interested in sports and entertainment, real estate, reach out, whether it's me or someone in the organization. We'd be happy to talk about it. And if there's an immediate fit, great. And if not, we'll certainly give you guidance and kind of help you on your way. But life's long, and be good to everyone you meet along the way.
Yeah, that's a good message to end the podcast on, and appreciate you being open to having the conversations with members of our audience. So, Jon, thank you for the time. Thank you for the insights, and thank you for being a guest on the Revenue Above Replacement podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adam. This was awesome. Appreciate you.